Yeah, so I think this is the video where Matt Walsh like justifies slavery or something. I'm curious about it. Let's see what we got. Hate farming? That's fine.
If you listened to the daily cancellation on Friday, then you already knew that this daily cancellation was coming. On Friday, we discussed the idea of reparations, in particular the plan proposed in California that would dole out $5 million apiece to black residents as repayment for the enslavement that they never experienced and that nobody they've ever known or spoken to has experienced.
Yeah, so really quick, like me personally, I think we're better off using our resources to help poor people, not just black people in general. Try to get better outcomes for all poor people in some way. When it comes to reparations, the best way I'd say nowadays is probably to invest into communities, not individuals. So sure, whatever. I can understand why people might disagree in some capacity. All right.
During that segment, I expanded on a counterpoint to reparations that had been made by a black college professor named Wilford Riley, which was a restatement of an argument made by others through the years, including Dinesh D'Souza, which says that reparation proposals are incoherent because they rest on the speculative notion that descendants of slaves are in a worse place today than they otherwise would have been. If
That's just a fact. We under that's true. Like descendants of slaves are overwhelmingly or generally, massively generally going to be in a worse position than they could have been if they were treated equally. It's true. Yeah. Again, I think we should focus on poor people because you can still have poor white people. I don't think we should give rich black people more money. That'd be ridiculous. Some people have been able to overcome that historical oppression. A lot of people haven't been able to. I think we should focus on poor people, but like it's still the truth of the matter, right? So, okay.
Ancestors were never enslaved. Now, if this speculation...
Yeah, it's not just slavery. It's slavery, it's redlining, it's not being treated as a human being. Up until 1965, black people weren't people. Like, they weren't equal people. And even then, socially, they weren't the same. But okay. The clip is on Twitter.
Accurate.
Where's Twitter?
If they are not in a worse spot, then there's nothing to repair. Nothing to repair for them, anyway. Certainly, we know that the slaves suffered greatly, but the slaves are all dead. So the reparations don't go to them, but rather go to people who, again, never experienced slavery. And so we must ask what exactly we are repairing as far as they are concerned.
Inequality, and then oppression is linked directly to that inequality. So, where's the clip that he had said?
To this argument, which I find compelling and interesting, the more plausible speculation is that, in fact, the ancestors of slaves are in a better spot today, not worse, because of slavery. This doesn't justify slavery or make it okay, obviously.
What?
It simply calls into...
I'm sorry, what did he say?
Better spot today, not worse, because of slavery. The more plausible speculation is that, in fact, the ancestors of slaves are in a better spot today, not worse, because of slavery.
Okay. So I'm going to good faith his argument, and then I'm going to explain to you why his argument's still fucking stupid. Okay. What he's saying is that what black people in America are treated are better, or like have more opportunity, money, and are treated better than black people outside of America, generally speaking. And that since they were brought here by force and then forced to do labor, their family now has access to more resources. Let's say that's true. The reason why black people aren't doing well in other countries is because we've colonized the fuck out of those countries and taken their resources. So at the end of the day, you're saying that the one way that we've oppressed black people is better than the other. Like, a little too based here, Matt. At the end of the day, there's still a lot of... It's still not... It's just based. Holy fuck. Come on, man. What's wrong with just trying to help outcomes of people who have been oppressed? Even, like, not just black people, poor people, drug addicts, people who come from single-parent households, et cetera, et cetera. So...
doesn't justify slavery or make it okay, obviously. It simply calls into question the basic logic behind allowing a group to literally cash in on...
It kind of does. It does come off as you justifying slavery, so...
historical atrocities. That's the point.
Okay.
And in an incredibly surprising turn of events, people aren't happy with this point.
Okay.
And this came as a great shock to me personally, as I'm a people pleaser who always tries to avoid controversy and conflict whenever I can. But
he's being facetious, but he intentionally tries to gravitate towards controversy because it's the only thing that keeps him alive. So... just so you know.
Found me this time, maybe for the first time, starting as always with the requisite Media Matters clip. Our PR reps pulled a 2-minute slice of the 10-minute monologue, did not provide any context, didn't even clarify that this was a conversation about reparations specifically.
Okay.
And they posted the clip, which then went viral. Now, for reference, we'll play the actual video they posted so that you understand where we are, what we're talking about for the rest of the conversation, which again is just one small sliver of a much longer monologue where I flesh out all these points and also explain why I'm making the points and what the overall point is.
Well, I'm not going to watch the full video, but I'm sure you will clarify. So,
but Media Matters never bothers with silly things like context. And they also know that the drooling hordes who get worked up by out of context clips also aren't going to stop to wonder about the context. So with that in mind, here's what they posted. In fact, it seems rather clear that black Americans are doing better here today than they would be had their ancestors generations ago never been brought to these shores.
Sure. Why bring that up? Why say that? What's the point? Because all you're doing, like, what is the intentionality? Like, yeah, they probably are. I mean, those countries in Africa are being fucked over too, a lot by white colonizers. And I think white people are pretty awesome. They're pretty cool people. But it is still a fact that it's happening. So, like, you know, it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're black, you're just kind of fucked. How it is around the world. You are just fucked. Sorry. Generally, not always, just generally. But what's the point of you saying this? Are you saying that we shouldn't help people who have oppression, or what it really is he's doing is he's just dismissing any type of lingering impact of systemic racism? This is all he's doing. Just okay.
We can prove this point by simply asking which African country anyone asking for reparations would prefer to live in. The answer, of course, is none of them. Now, you might offer the rebuttal that if slavery never existed, if we're reimagining history without that institution at all, then Africa itself would be in a better shape, better place, in better shape, and maybe indeed black Americans would be better off there. But this seems highly unlikely, and it also ignores the fact that Africans participated in slavery and the slave trade as much as they were victims of it. Not to mention, if we're reimagining the world without African slavery, then we have to also imagine it without all other forms of global slavery, since African slavery was merely one variety, one off.
Yeah, sure. So if we're reimagining the world without any form of slavery, I'd consider colonization a form of, like, slavery in some capacity. So then, boom, black people will probably be doing a lot better now.
Of this global institution.
Okay.
And now we have totally, at that point, rewritten the history of the world in a way so dramatic that it's absolutely impossible to say which individuals today would end up worse or better in this alternate universe. I mean, if you go back in time...
Well, nobody can go back in time. It's just an acknowledgement of an issue in the past so we could work on it now in a way that we can provide better outcomes to people by providing similar opportunities to even poor people.
And get rid of slavery from the entire world. You have just... It's impossible to say what the world looks like right now.
Yeah. Also, you really can't get rid of slavery because the Bible justifies it, and the Bible is always good. And so slavery is actually fucking based, guys. Just look at the Bible. It says slavery is okay, and it's okay to beat your slave as long as they don't die within a couple days. So if you think about it, he's just being consistent with the objective fact that slavery, that the Bible justifies slavery, and that organized religion thinks that slavery is okay. And also, it's speculative, but that organized religion has bastardized the word of God to decide to use it to be oppressive towards fucking slaves, women, and fucking people of color, LGBTQ people, etc., etc. That's what it's really coming down to. Okay, there you go.
Actually, what we can say is that we'd all end up worse. All of us today would be in a worse spot if slavery never existed at all across the entire globe.
Matt, burst!
Because a change that significant would likely shift the course of events in a way that would mean none of us would even exist. It would be a world full of other people who are not us.
Matt's just getting ahead of the game because in 10 years we're going to have time machines. Matt's just trying to tell us not to change anything. So you got to respect this brave take, guys.
So I know that I benefit today from virtually everything my ancestors did and everything did to them, because if any of that had not happened, there's a very good chance that I never would have come into being. And as I see it, I benefit from being if the other option is not being.
Okay.
Well, you can already imagine the reaction, so we don't need to read through.
Why do people react to this anymore, though? Because he's just a fucking moron. Like, there's really nothing. Like, just stop caring about what Matt Walsh has to say, and like, we won't really have these problems. Even me watching this video, I've been consuming less and less Matt Walsh, even Ben Shapiro, because it's just dumb. It's always like this desperation to be like anti-woke. It's not trying to have the right conversation. It's just trying to piss you off, because Matt Walsh can't exist without upsetting you. If you just stopped caring. Like, half of his viewership is from conservatives that liberals get upset by what he has to say. So you could literally take away 50% of his viewer base, which is those conservatives. 25% of his viewer base are people who are liberals who are crying about him, which I'm one of them right now, I suppose. And then the other 25% are people that, like, it goes to the algorithm. They just stop. Who cares? Oh, he's a fucking idiot, but who gives a shit? You know what I mean?
Very many of these. But here are a few people of the thousands who expressed their outrage at a point that it goes without saying none of them even attempted to refute. Heath Mayo, a man who calls himself a Christian conservative and who also happens to look exactly like his name, for the record, tweeted, "This is Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire, and increasingly you're just a bad person if you support this know-nothing filth with your subscription dollars." Bernice King, the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., responded, and here it is. One of the reasons why some don't want the horrors of slavery taught in schools, because they don't see it, or Jim Crow, as an atrocity, but a grotesque statement, an egregious insult to the countless Africans who perished in the Atlantic or were enslaved here.
I mean, if you gave us Martin Luther King's family, and you expect me to disagree with arguably one of the greatest men in fucking American history? I'm not being facetious here. What did you expect me to do? Oh, I can't believe this fucking idiot. What? Okay, like...
Of course, race hustling shill Roland Martin got his 2 cents in. This analysis.
Hey guys, here's a conservative. God bless you for showing a conservative and like Martin Luther King's daughter, 2 people that are like that. And now you're going to show one progressive. Okay.
By Matt Walsh is the dumbest you'll ever see. This idiot wants to opine about the condition of Africa, yet makes no mention of racist white colonialism. Sure. Hell, racist whites redrew the boundaries of Africa at the 1885 Berlin Conference. What a Wajahat Ali kept it simple. Pro-slavery, eh? Hell of a plot twist. A guy named Ryan McMakin posted, Walsh has been good on exposing the dumbness of the whole men can be women thing, but there are not words sufficient to describe how stupid this statement about slavery is. The argument is a sort of arcane, trivial mental masturbation I would expect from a college freshman philosophy major. And given that his apparent point here is to basically say, stop saying slavery was so bad, it's a totally bizarre hill to die on.
That's pretty much where you're coming from. That is the intentionality of what you're saying.
And there was also a lot of stuff like this. When Matt Walsh eventually dies a hopefully incredibly horrific, painful death, it'll be very cool watching people celebrate.
Okay.
Now, I actually agree with that last one. Not the bit about hoping I die painfully. I prefer not to die painfully. But the second part, I know that many people will celebrate my death, and I take great pride in that. If I spent my life fighting against the left's cultural agenda, and then I died, and they didn't cheer over my death and mock me as I lay buried in the ground, that would be a strong indication that I was incredibly ineffective. The left will celebrate.
Why is everybody talking about slavery being good today? Because Kelly Caddigade's a fucking idiot that listens to an even bigger idiot about fucking complex race issues.
Your death if they perceive you as a serious threat.
Like, here's the take, guys, on slavery. It happened. It sucks. It had some bad stuff came from it. Let's try to reverse some of that bad stuff today in the way that we can control it. It's not that complicated. You don't have to go like, well, actually, I think we should keep it because we have time machines, so we shouldn't go back. It's like we don't have time machines. Like, we don't have to talk about whether we should go back and change the course of history. If we did have time machines, say, hey, listen, let's just keep things the way they are because we don't know what could have happened. We can acknowledge that it was a bad thing, and we shouldn't want it to have happened, and we should also try to change it. But when you use this language like, well, you're better off over here, you're better off a slave. Actually, you're lucky you were a slave. Your family was a slave. You're lucky that. Really? You think that people are getting lynched in fucking trees is lucky? Like, what is wrong with you? Like, it's just a downplay of this of the oppression. It's just silly. There's no productive reason other than like you want to have like some base dumb fucking racist take.
And I certainly wish to be a serious threat. But that aside, let me offer a few thoughts.
Bro, you're as serious as the people with bulimia because they throw up every time they see you and they're trying to work on that.
That's in response to the responses. 2 thoughts to be precise. First, predictably.
Yeah.
Everybody in the outrage mob accuses me of arguing that slavery wasn't bad or that it wasn't an atrocity.
That's what it comes off as.
That it was actually good. I didn't say any of those things.
No, but the cadence in which you're engaging with this topic, or the carelessness rather, it does communicate that.
Nor did I imply or suggest them. In fact, I refer to slavery as an atrocity in the very segment where Bernice King says,
cigarettes are bad, guys. Watch me smoke 20 of them.
I argue that it wasn't an atrocity. Obviously, I believe it was an atrocity. Everyone believes that. It's a point.
But there's no emotion behind it. You don't care. That's the problem. You don't seem to realize how much of an atrocity it is. You're not sensitive about the topic. You are irrational in the sense that you are completely emotionless when it comes to this actual atrocity. People were getting hanged. They were getting killed. They're getting beaten. They were forcing people to fuck each other. They were basically forcing them to rape each other so that they can have particular offspring. This was like a systematic fucking dehumanization process just so that we can get better cotton. It's and then just to be like, well, you're lucky that your ancestors were violently like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like some dumb shit. I mean, we're at a point now where like it's insane. It's just fucking incredible.
So self-evident and clear that it doesn't even need to be said. Okay, it's
we don't need to say it,
guys. Pointless thing to even say because everyone knows it.
Guys, it's so pointless to acknowledge the bad parts of slavery. When we talk about slavery, we should just talk about the good parts. Like how you were better off being a slave because you're here now. Oh. Yeah.
There is not a pro-slavery faction in the modern United States. So there's no need to continually assure each other that slavery was bad. Hey, you know, slavery was bad? Yeah, it was bad. It's really bad. Very, very bad. It's all bad. It's really bad. We know that. It's one of the few things that we all still know.
Yeah.
So when the pitchfork mob accuses me of holding the view that slavery wasn't bad, what they mean is that all I'm allowed to say about slavery is that it was bad. Okay? They want us to talk about slavery. They definitely want us to talk about it. They want us to harp on it. They want us to go on and on about it, just like they do. But the only thing we're ever allowed to say is some variation of it was bad.
It is bad. It was
over
bad.
and over and over again. If you try to move on to the next sentence, it was bad. End of sentence. And then continue and say something else about it. If you try to articulate some other thought, if you try to say anything.
It was bad, but guys, was it really that bad? Because you're better off. Hey, black people, you're better off now that you're here. So it really wasn't that bad if you think about it. That's what you're saying, you fucking idiot. Because look at Africa. They're all doing so poorly. Let's forget about the fact that white people colonized that area too. And listen, white people aren't bad. Okay? We're just better. No, I'm just kidding. Listen, the way that we used to engage back in the day was like barbaric, and now we're moving on from that. And now we should just try to create a better, more equal place overall, slowly. It's not that fucking, it's not like a hot take. So it's the blandest take ever. Okay? It's bland as hell.
Nothing else about it, you are automatically guilty of thinking that it's not bad. In other words, if it was bad isn't your only thought about slavery, then you don't have that thought about it at all.
Whoa,
so either the only thing you think about slavery is that it was bad, or you think it was good.
Okay.
You're not allowed to have, you're only allowed to have one thought per topic.
Oh, it was bad. Guys, slavery was pretty cool because we got cheap products out of it. Oh, wait a minute. Like, what's this? You just have to stop at the coat, bro. It was bad. We shouldn't be. There's really not a lot of nuance that we can have in this conversation. You're using it as a justifier to not help people who have been negatively impacted by historical systemic racism. And like, I understand that you're like, well, I don't believe it. You don't have to believe it. You can believe in whatever you want. But systemic racism is a fact. The negative impacts have been documented well. It's a fact. Like, you're wrong objectively, and you're coping because you're like a little baby. I don't know what you want me to tell you.
And this is how they treat slavery. It's how they treat every other subject. They have, for every subject, here's the thought you can have on that. And if you're going to talk about it, yeah, go ahead and talk about it, but only just say that. Continue saying that over and over and over again. And this is what makes
or you just not talk about it at all.
debate and dialogue on the national level
you could have just kept quiet.
Impossible, not to mention incredibly boring when we're all just repeating back to each other this stuff.
What's funny is that, like, if you want to dismiss systemic racism, you could just be like, well, I don't think anybody nowadays have been impacted by slavery. Like, okay, that's true. Like, nobody's been a slave nowadays. I understand that. But instead he went on to say, like, not only are you not personally impacted by slavery, black people, but you're actually better off coming from a family of slaves. That's what he's saying. He's adding extra stank on it. He's like, you would get that vinegar smell in your balls after a day of not showering. That's what he's adding to the conversation.
We already know and has long been established. How can we have a dialogue when you aren't allowed to develop your thoughts beyond this was bad?
I prefer live-a-logs because I'm a good person.
Very bad. It was so bad.
I'm pro-life.
So bad. It was the bad thing. It was a really bad thing. It wasn't always this way. As I mentioned, Dinesh D'Souza has been making a similar argument for years. In fact, here he is on NPR. NPR of all places, because this is the kind of thing you used to be able to say on NPR 22 years ago.
Okay.
Listen to what he says.
Oh, yeah.
As a native of India, a country colonized by the British for centuries, and as a person of color living in the United States, I cannot agree with the idea of reparations.
I just want to be very clear. So, God bless Dinesh and everything, but Dinesh is somebody who came from India with a lot of money, and then he came to America. And if you come to America with a lot of money, you're going to be able to reap the positive benefits. So you're most likely not even close to as tied to that oppression in India as other people are. A lot of times when we take people from other countries, we generally try to get ones that have more money, It's so just throwing it out there.
The concept of reparations is based on the premise that the descendants of slavery and colonialism are worse off as a result of those historical crimes.
Yes.
In reality, these descendants are vastly better off than they would have been had slavery and colonialism never occurred.
Doubtful.
Let me explain. When I was a young boy growing up in Bombay, I noticed that my grandfather, who had grown up under British colonialism, had developed a strong hostility to the white man. I realized that he had an anti-white animus that I didn't share. This puzzled me. Why did he and I feel so differently?
Because you weren't actively oppressed?
Finally, I figured it out. The reason for our difference of perception was that colonialism had been pretty bad for him and pretty good for me.
Why?
Another way to put it is that colonialism had injured those who
But why? How is it good for you?
who lived under it, but paradoxically it proved beneficial to their descendants. Virtually everything that I do and cherish has been shaped by a worldview that was brought to India by colonialism.
Wait, okay, hold on. I'm trying to actually understand what he's saying. Is he saying that it was really bad for the people who lived through it, but it benefited the generations? Is that what you're saying? So it was super bad for the actual slaves that were beaten, tortured, abused, raped, hanged, killed, etc. But now their ancestors are doing much better. I just think that maybe slavery is bad and so is colonialism, and we did what we did and it is what it is, and now we should just move forward better. We don't have to have all these like mental gymnastics to try to justify why it was not why it was a good thing. Because what you're doing right now is you're justifying why colonialism and slavery are a good thing. It's one thing to say like, hey, it was bad, but it was in the past. We shouldn't blame people nowadays, but we should work on oppression for sure. But you're saying it was a good thing actually because it benefited me. What you're saying is that colonization and slavery, these are good things. This logic means that you think slavery was good because Dinesh's idea is that the initial oppression was bad in some capacity, but it yielded such positive results that overall it's a good thing. That's what he's saying. That's what he's communicating here, right? You have to understand. Can you not critically engage with the fucking subject matter of like another conservative person? Like, I don't understand.
I write in English. I work on a computer. I believe in individual dignity, in human rights, in democratic
shit my
government,
pants, baby.
in equality before the law, in the concept of innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
All these things are the product of Western civilization.
Based.
Now, again, NPR.
West is best, baby.
Years ago. Now, it's the sort of thing that you'll only ever hear uttered.
Not for nothing, but even the way that Dinesh had that conversation was like drastically more respectful and intelligent than the way that Matt Walsh is trying to have this conversation. I don't think Matt understands what he's hearing. At least when I listen to Dinesh, I see a level of genuinity and I understand what he's trying to say, and I could probably engage in a conversation there. But Matt just heard that, interpreted it his own way as a way to just dismiss slavery and be like, oh, this is cringe.
On conservative media, and even there, most of the time, not. And if you do hear it, it's shocking. It's utterly shocking. Now, leftists, of course, disagreed, I would imagine, many of them did, with that at the time. But there wasn't any nuclear explosion of mindless outrage with a bunch of slobbering dummies screaming,
It also wasn't on Twitter.
you support slavery! You think slavery is good! People understood the point that he was making because it is, at a minimum, valid and logical and thoughtful. It also happens to be self-evidently true. But these days, thanks to social media, thanks to the increasing derangement of the left, thanks to plummeting IQ scores and all the rest of it, you cannot make.
Yeah, it's because of financial oppression, baby. Maybe we should get the rich to pay their fair share of taxes instead of paying lower effective tax rates than the rest of us. What fucking crazy, man. Crazy guys, am I right?
Valid and logical arguments, because a valid and logical argument requires you to develop a thought beyond the one simple, shallow slogan that the left demands we all consign ourselves to. Second,
That racism is bad. Like,
you can somewhat understand the left's confusion here, I suppose. They firmly believe that the ends justify the means. Okay, it's one of the core beliefs of their ideology. The ends justify the means. So,
what are you talking about? That's Dinesh's entire point, is that the ends justify the means. His entire argument there was that even though the colonialism was bad originally, it had really profoundly positive impacts on me as a generation. So the ends being good, by his logic, justify the means of oppression and fucking basically colonization and oppression. His literal argument was the ends justify the means. Dude, this guy's a fucking idiot. It's like he literally just doesn't have the ability to exist outside himself. I don't even think he's self-aware. Holy fuck. That's Dinesh's entire argument. Your entire argument is that the ends justify the means. You're saying that slavery is overall a good thing because now the descendants are here and being treated better than they were being treated in Africa. So even though slavery was bad, the ends justify the means. Do you know what the phrase the ends justify the means mean? Like, are you fucking, you have to drink bleach constantly or something. What do? Do you just like do you not breathe? Do you like put your head in a fucking bag and go to sleep? How do you have this type of fucking brain injury to not understand? Like, you don't make sense from word to word. You're inconsistent constantly. You're just a fucking idiot. Oh my God. It's just fucking kills me. The left is only about the ends justify the means. Your entire logic for slavery is that the ends justify the means. Holy shit.
when they hear this discussion, they assume that I'm making an ends justify the means argument.
You are!
Because if they were making the argument, that's what they would be doing.
You are making an ends justify the means argument. What's up, baby?
If I'm saying that people today have benefited from historical atrocities, I must be saying that the atrocities were actually good and justified, because that's how they think.
But you literally said in this video that if you could go back, you wouldn't want to change anything because it could make everything worse. So even though that thing is bad, we should make you're telling us that if you could go back in time, you would maintain slavery. You're saying that the ends justify the means. You're saying that you are saying that. It's literally no other interpretation of what you're saying.
But that's not how I think.
That is how
I
you're
think
thinking.
that there are no results that could ever retroactively justify an evil act. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
If I were to shoot you and send you to the hospital, and you don't die, and while you're at the hospital, they, because they're doing all these tests and everything, they happen to discover incidentally that you have an aggressive form of cancer. And so they treat the cancer and you survive. My attempted murder does not retroactively become a form of medical treatment.
We're not talking about murder. We're talking about enslaving human beings. What?
Okay, it does not become good. Now, it's true that if I hadn't shot you, you never would have discovered your cancer, perhaps. And then, or maybe you
God apparently wanted you to shoot me so you could find my aggressive cancer.
discovered it too late.
Maybe if I had access to better healthcare, I'd be able to get more consistent cancer screenings. You ever think about that, Matt?
So paradoxically, me shooting you resulted in saving your life.
Sure.
But it was still an act of objective evil to shoot you.
Okay. So slavery was bad. Cool. So we should try to reverse the negative impacts of slavery.
So that's the way that works. Now, here's the thing. If, expanding the analogy, if after having your cancer treated, you go on to have children, and then your children have children, and your children's children have children, and many years down the line, your descendants try to sue my descendants for the generational trauma caused by my assault against you.
You're an idiot. So, Matt, you realize that there's a difference between shooting a person and enslaving them for their entire lives, and then making them work for you for $0, and them not being able to make any money to support their family or better their family off, and doing that generationally. You do realize that that's a different thing. Getting shot is like, let's say it's a 2-month-long event of getting shot, treating this aggressive cancer that apparently didn't kill you already. Let's say it's a 6-month process, and then you get to go back to work and make money for your family, is different than being a slave and not being able to make money for your family and getting beaten and abused and forced to fuck particular women so that they can try to breed you to breed more effective slaves. You do get that, right? Your argument's just dumb. You're dumb. It's just a dumb argument. There's a fundamental, drastic difference. The act of murder or the act of shooting somebody isn't even close to the same as systematically enslaving an entire group of people. It's not the same thing.
Well, if that were to happen, then in that case, it would suddenly become relevant to point out that these people claiming damages, decades and decades removed from the incident, probably wouldn't exist. Their entire family tree would be erased if not for the evil act that they are now trying to cash in on.
Oh my God.
That's the crux of it. Okay. The point that you have most likely benefited from historical evils becomes relevant when you attempt to quantify and monetize the trickle-down harm that you claim the historical evil has done to you. It's at that juncture that someone needs to make the obvious point. This thing that happened long ago was very, very bad. It was very bad for your...
I think that somebody should try to figure out if Matt Walsh has aggressive cancer or not and save him. You know what I'm saying?
Ancestors. It is not, however, very bad for you. Yet you are the one claiming quantifiable and financial harm. The reparations demands are what makes this point especially relevant, but even without reparations, there's still value in acknowledging what we're talking about here and thinking about it.
What?
Yes, it is true that you likely would not be here today if history had not unfolded exactly as it did, right? The butterfly effect.
Okay.
The good, the bad, the ugly, the atrocious, all of it led to you.
Wow,
and to me.
Stuff. Yeah.
Rewrite history and you will have written us out of the book completely.
Wow, beautiful.
Aside from disqualifying any reparations demand, which I think it does completely, what else does that mean for you? Well, it simply means that we shouldn't live our lives obsessed with wrongs committed long ago, consumed by resentment over ancient sins.
I mean, that's a different argument. I would say it a little more tactfully, but like, sure, yeah, you shouldn't obsess about oppression. Listen, we should acknowledge different forms of oppression, and then we should, as a society, work to reverse those in some capacity. But you shouldn't victimize yourself based on that, because you're going to develop a victim complex and you're never going to succeed. If you operate in the world with, like, let's say I'm fat, and I think that every negative interaction I have is because I'm fat, like, I'm going to fail in life. But, well, fatness aside, let's say you're a black person, and, like, you grew up, and there's, like, a descendant of slavery, and you grew up in a poor area, and you don't have access to decent food and water, or decent schooling, or decent jobs. Your parents can't get jobs, and then you don't have jobs. This is a profoundly different thing, right? You should be like, fuck, I want to fight against the system, but let me work as hard as I can in this current broken one. That's the way that you should operate. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to help these people. At the very least, poor people. That's where I'm at. Help poor people. Not just people who are the victims of systemic racism. Just any poor person, because a rich black person doesn't need money. Jesus Christ.
It doesn't mean those sins were not sins, okay? It doesn't mean that the wrongs were actually right. It just means that we should stop trying to make ourselves the victims of the very events that resulted in our existence.
Those two different arguments, idiot.
Our existence in the most prosperous and comfortable civilization in history, I might add. We should, in a word, move on with our lives.
Okay.
The lives that we are blessed to be living.
Yeah.
Because what else is there to do?
Help poor people.
Just keep living in the moment, in today.
Yeah.
That's the point.
I farted.
And that's also why the outrage mob is today, once again, canceled. That'll do it for this portion of the show.
Okay. Wow. I can't believe I sat through that. Okay, guys. Well, that was Matt Walsh's really good point. Obviously, we're all stupid for not understanding him. He's a very smart-based person. I always love listening to Matt Walsh.